Welcome again, everyone, to lesson 2 of our study of the Old Testament in 1st and 2nd Kings, and in particular, our study of Elijah. So if you missed lesson 1, I'd encourage you to go back and watch that so you can get caught up to where we are today. And we're going to pick up in 1st Kings chapter 17. But before we do that, we're going to do a little recap. Well, I say we. I'm going to actually ask Jeff to do that for us. So, Jeff, can you give us a little recap of lesson 1?
Yeah, sure. One of the things we picked up is that if God says it, it will surely happen. And there were two examples in the first lesson. One was this curse that Joshua had made when the Israelites entered the promised land, defeated Jericho, and they destroyed the city. And we saw that Ahab, this evil king, had rebuilt it, and God's curse exactly happened. And then we also saw that in the book of Deuteronomy, part of the covenant was if the Israelites fell into idolatry, that God would bring drought. And we learned that Elijah, through his prayer life, had a hand in bringing that drought to pass. And we're in this book. I keep saying the book of First and Second Kings. In the original Hebrew, it was one book, and later on in the Greek translation, it was the first place that it was split into two because of the length of it. But this book goes all the way up to the time when the nation of Judah, the southern kingdom, gets sent into Babylonian exile. And so this book of Kings is helping them to understand, how did we get here? How did we get to exile? What went wrong? And so Elijah is acting as sort of a bulwark to what's going wrong. The mission of a prophet is just to call people back to God. And we talk some also about storytelling, and I continue to just really love these stories and the way they're expressed. Two things in what we're going to read today are good storytelling to me. One is unexpected situations, things that grab your attention, and we have to kind of work hard to get into some of the cultural context to understand what is surprising. So we're gonna try to do that. And then another thing that helps make stories memorable are the characters in them, and we're going to meet a memorable character. So with that, let's get into it. We're going to reread some of what we read last time, because we're focusing on how God provides for Elijah here in chapter 17. And there's sort of three incidents where God provides. So Kevin, if you could read for us verses 1 through 6, please.
Absolutely. So we'll be in 1 Kings chapter 17, and again, verses 1 through 6, and I'll be reading from the ESV. Now Elijah the Tishbite of Tishbe in Gilead said to Ahab, "As the Lord, the God of Israel, lives, before whom I stand, there shall be neither dew nor rain these years, except by my word." And the word of the Lord came to him, "Depart from here and turn eastward, and hide yourself by the brook Cherith, which is east of the Jordan. You shall drink from the brook, and I have commanded the ravens to feed you there." So he went and did according to the word of the Lord. He went and lived by the brook Cherith, that is east of the Jordan. And the ravens brought him bread and meat in the morning, and bread and meat in the evening, and he drank from the brook.
So we see in this that Elijah himself is affected by the drought. The drought is everywhere, and he's dependent on this brook. He's dependent on God providing food for him. And this is not the first time in the Bible we've seen God provide food for somebody. Kevin, is there another time in the Bible where God provided food?
Well, my mind always goes to manna from heaven.
Yeah.
Providing for the Jews at that time.
Right. And there's connections in these Elijah stories back to things that have already happened and forward to things that are going to happen in the New Testament. And I think those connections and similarities are meant to attach us to the seriousness of what's going on. The Exodus is one of the key events in all the Bible. You know, it's the key to the foundation of the nation of Israel. And so, you know, God providing and connecting to that, you know, is an attention grabber. And the way that God provides food should be an attention grabber. Now, we don't have ravens here in our part of North Carolina. Have you ever seen a raven?
Not in person.
Yeah, I think I saw them one time traveling somewhere, and you know, they're kind of like oversized crows, but the part that is kind of harder for us to pick up on is that ravens are scavengers. They're kind of omnivores. If Elijah was being fed by buzzards, that would grab our attention because we have buzzards. We see them by the side of the road, you know, picking at carcasses, and that's maybe a little bit extreme, but you know, in the dietary laws that the Jews had, the raven was an unclean animal. That's in Leviticus 11:15. And like we said last time, we'll get these scripture references into the YouTube video description so you can look that up. So the way that God provides food for Elijah is kind of surprising. So let's keep going. Kevin, if you could read now verses 7 through 16, and we're going to see a couple of more attention-grabbing details.
Sure.
Go ahead and read, please.
Picking up in verse 7. And after a while the brook dried up, because there was no rain in the land. Then the word of the Lord came to him, Arise, go to Zarephath, which belongs to Sidon, and dwell there. Behold, I have commanded a widow there to feed you. So he arose and went to Zarephath. And when he came to the gate of the city, behold, a widow was there gathering sticks. And he called to her and said, Bring me a little water in a vessel, that I may drink. And as she was going to bring it, he called to her and said, Bring me a morsel of bread in your hand. And she said, As the Lord your God lives, I have nothing baked, only a handful of flour in a jar, and a little oil in a jug. And now I am gathering a couple of sticks, that I may go in and prepare it for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die. And Elijah said to her, Do not fear. Go and do as you have said. But first, make me a little cake of it and bring it to me. And afterward, make something for yourself and your son. For thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, The jar of flour shall not be spent, and the jug of oil shall not be empty, until the day that the Lord sends rain upon the earth. And she went and did as Elijah said, and she and he and her household ate for many days. The jar of flour was not spent, neither did the jug of oil become empty, according to the word of the Lord that he spoke by Elijah.
So the two surprising things to me are the where and the to whom about God's instructions in verse 9. He sends him to Zarephath, and the writer takes the pains, you know, it kind of helps us out. We don't know where Zarephath is, but the writer here tells us it's close to Sidon. in our previous lesson, we met somebody from Sidon. Who was that?
Jezebel.
Yeah. And we don't have positive associations with Sidon and Jezebel, do we?
No, no.
So God is sending Elijah to a pagan place. It's outside of Israel. They're idol worshipers. It's also pretty far away. This Cherith Ravine is east of the Jordan, and then Sidon is over kind of near the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. So he's kind of like crisscrossing and going pretty far away. The other surprising thing is about who Elijah is sent to. He's sent to a widow, right? And we read about widows in various places in the Bible. Normally, when we're reading in the Bible about widows, we're reading that they're the people that are overlooked, and we need to make sure that they're cared for. But God is telling Elijah, go to the widow, and she's going to care for you, this pagan woman in Sidon, where they worship Baal. so as a Jewish reader, we would be like, okay, how's this going to work out? So he comes and he's approaching the city, and here's this woman outside. It kind of reminds me of some of those stories from Genesis about how Isaac and Jacob got their wives, and the father was sending back, and like Leah was meeting somebody at a well, giving water to somebody. So there's some more of these echoes of other Old Testament stories, and I think that there's a Middle Eastern hospitality. There's a hospitality of more less urban. In our day, we wouldn't just go into a city and ask somebody for food and water. But in this part of the world, in this time, there was this sense of hospitality to strangers. But I also, wonder, did Elijah realize that she was the one? How did he know that she was the one? And perhaps the request was a test to find out, because she does believe him. Kevin, do you have any thoughts about this widow? And this stranger shows up. He's obviously an Israelite. She recognizes that he's a foreigner, and he asks her for food, and she gives.
Well, I've got a few things I'm thinking about here, Jeff. I'm thinking about what you said in our lesson 1 about the order, and we were talking specifically about prophets and how we would typically foresee a prophet speaking and what they would speak about. But what I'm seeing is, and you highlighted this earlier, about, first of all, Elijah is being fed by the ravens. And the phrase, at least in the ESV, is, this is word of the Lord to Elijah, I have commanded the ravens to feed you. And then when you go down to verse 9, again, the word of the Lord came to him, and behold, I have commanded a widow there to feed you. And you made the point earlier about the raven. We would not expect that to be something, well, even today, I wouldn't want to get fed by a bird or a buzzard. And again, with the laws of the day, knowing that that is unclean, that wouldn't be the expectation. And the same thing here about a widow. The expectation is a widow's life is very difficult in those times. And so, that wouldn't be the expectation from Elijah, but the Lord commanded the ravens were going to feed him, this widow was going to feed him, and so it was going to happen. And perhaps God had, or perhaps this woman in the heartland of Baal worshiping had some knowledge of the Lord, of Yahweh, and we kind of see that in verse 12. And she said, "As the Lord your God lives." So I think she has a knowledge of that, and maybe within this town there is this woman who maybe not fully into the Baal culture and knows about God.
There definitely is something about this widow, because even Jesus makes a reference to her in the New Testament, in the book of Luke, chapter 4, starting in verse 24. "I tell you the truth," Jesus continued, "no prophet is accepted in his hometown. I assure you that there were many widows in Israel in Elijah's time when the sky was shut for 3.5 years and there was a severe famine throughout the land. Yet Elijah was not sent to any of them, but to a widow of Zarephath in the region of Sidon." So Jesus is going through this thing in his hometown where he's not well received. He's not able to do many miracles. There's not much faith. And so he's making this comparison to the time of Elijah, when the nation of Israel is going astray and they're following after Baal. They're, Ahab and Jezebel are leading them, and they're going along with this. And so Elijah, this prophet of God, is sent to a foreign country, and they are having the same drought. It's in the same area. The drought is affecting this town of Zarephath, and she's got nothing else. She's down to her last meal when Elijah shows up. I mentioned at the top that the readers of the book of Kings would likely have been the nation of Judah in exile in Babylonia, and they have been removed from the land. They've been removed from Jerusalem and the temple, and part of that exile story in other parts of the Bible, other written prophets, is emphasizing to them that God is God everywhere. And that's kind of a lesson here, that Elijah has gone outside of the territory of Israel, and the thinking of this culture is polytheism. Every location has its own god. We're in Baal territory here in Zarephath, but the message of Kings is that God is God everywhere. And that was something I came across studying for this. And my initial reaction was, yeah, I know that. I'm not a polytheist. But then the more I thought about it, I thought, do I really live that way? If I'm at worship service at the building, it's easy for me to know that God is God. If I'm having my quiet time at home studying the Bible and praying, it's easy for me to know that God is God. But what about when I'm at work? What about when I'm watching the media, news, entertainment? What about in my neighborhood? Is God really God everywhere? Do I have that faith and that assurance that God's authority is everywhere, even when people don't seem to be responding? Um, and like you say, this widow, she is recognizing the Lord your God, Yahweh your God, and makes comments about that. So let's see where this goes next. Kevin, could you read us the starting in verse 17 through the end of the chapter, please?
Absolutely. After this, the son of the woman, the mistress of the house, became ill, and his illness was so severe that there was no breath left in him. And she said to Elijah, "What have you against me, O man of God? You have come to me to bring my sin to remembrance and to cause the death of my son." And he said to her, "Give me your son." And he took him from her arms and carried him up into the upper chamber where he lodged, and laid him on his own bed. And he cried to the Lord, "O Lord my God, have you brought calamity even upon the widow with whom I sojourned by killing her son?" Then he stretched himself upon the child 3 times and cried to the Lord, "O Lord my God, let this child's life come into him again." And the Lord listened to the voice of Elijah. And the life of the child came into him again, and he revived. And Elijah took the child and brought him down from the upper chamber into the house and delivered him to his mother. And Elijah said, "See, your son lives." And the woman said to Elijah, "Now I know that you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord in your mouth is truth."
I really like this widow. She's just an interesting character, and everything she says in this chapter just kind of pops and grabs my attention. You know, the very beginning, she's saying, "Okay, I'm getting ready to fix my last meal and I'm going to die." And I kind of think God is almost poking fun at Elijah, sending him to this moody woman, because Elijah himself is kind of moody. We're going to see that in a couple of chapters. But she comes around, and you know that where this ends, I know that you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord from your mouth is the truth. This is really the punchline of this whole chapter. It's just saying Elijah is really a prophet of God because the things he says come true. Again, in Deuteronomy, there was some description of Moses is talking about what prophets would do that come to you later. And, the test of a true prophet of Yahweh is the things they say come true. This is the first person in the Bible that is raised from the dead. And Elijah had the boldness to pray that God would raise this boy. It's kind of something. We talked last time about Elijah's prayer life, and the drought is connected to his prayer. And here we see this boy raised from the dead. And we said in the previous lesson that Baal is an agricultural fertility god. He's responsible for rain. And, there's cycles of rainy season, dry season, cycles of winter and springtime. And so Baal is also associated with life and death. And so in this chapter, there's these jabs showing that Yahweh, the God of Israel, is the true God. And in the specifics of these miracles, the drought and the raising of the dead are promoting how he's superior to Baal. Is there anything in here? Yeah, Kevin, did you look?
I was going to say, Jeff, that's an excellent point there, because reading through this, I didn't put that together, what you just said. It really is jabs at Baal and how that can no way compare to the true God. And this is the beginning of that. I mean, I think there's more explicit examples of that we're going to read in future lessons, but I didn't I didn't even think about that with here, and I appreciate you enlightening me about that life and death aspect of Baal worshiping, because clearly this is something that um, God has the upper hand in. There
Right.
really is no comparison.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Kevin, I was going to say, these miracles that we see Elijah doing, does this remind you of anything in the New Testament?
This absolutely does. So Jeff is laughing because we were talking about this earlier, and that was where my mind goes immediately. So this is almost a complete parallel to what we read in Luke and Jesus and a widow and her son, even to the point of where he meets her, the widow in the New Testament. Jesus meets her at a city gate. Very similar circumstances. It plays out very similar to what we read here in First Kings.
Yeah, that's in Luke 7, and we'll put that scripture reference in the description. The never-ending jar of flour. This is not as exact, but Jesus feeding the multitudes with the loaves and fishes, and multiplying the loaves of bread is also reminiscent. There's really only 3 periods in the Bible where there's a cluster of miracles together. The first one is Moses and the Exodus, leading the Israelites out of Egypt, everything they do to get Pharaoh to release them. And then this section that we're in with Elijah and later Elisha. And then in the New Testament, Jesus and the apostles. So those are the 3 times in the Bible where God is having people perform miracles in His name, and this one with Elijah and Elisha, to me, seems the most unusual. Moses and kind of the Exodus is just formational for God's chosen people and turning them into a nation. Jesus obviously is bringing the new covenant, and he's the Messiah. It's interesting that at this time that doesn't see, it's not a change of the covenant, and yet here's this cluster of miracles. And I think it shows us the seriousness with which God takes the disobedience, the unfaithfulness, the idolatry, and it shows the love that God has, that He's willing to go to great lengths to rescue His people. He wants to get their attention. The prophets, they do a lot of strange things. They kind of perform some of their prophecies. Think about Ezekiel and some of the things that he did. And here there's the testimony of miracles that is backing up what Elijah and Elisha do. I wrote this down back in December. Our Elisha's Christmas sermon. He said the birth of Jesus reminds us that God works in all things, including in the insignificant. And this widow in Zarephath, that seems so random that Elijah is sent to her and provides for her in this time, and even is able to raise her son from the dead. But it pleased God to do that, and this woman was able to come to some kind of faith in God through this. The other thing that I'm just going to mention in terms of the connection of these miracles of Elijah and the work of Jesus, and we're going to get more into this really as we wind down the study. In probably the last lesson, Elijah is a type. I've heard that a lot of preachers and Bible scholars talking about types, and I've kind of dug into that more. It's a kind of foretelling where, but it's a pattern that's repeated, and so in the similarities of the miracles that Jesus does and the miracles that happened with Elijah and Elisha, Jesus came to God's people, Israel, and they were expected to know these stories. And by seeing Jesus do similar miracles, that should be confirming to them that it's an added layer. As if a miracle is not enough. It's not enough that Jesus raises the widow of Nain's son, but they're like, oh yeah, Elijah did this same thing to the widow of Zarephath. So it kind of increases the power of what this is, and just kind of helps us see and marvel at the way God is able to work out his plan over time. And just I can't leave that without saying, but when we really dig into this type idea, we'll see that John the Baptist is really who is being foretold, and we'll talk about that. All right. So I think it's time to kind of wind this down. The takeaways that I had from this, God is God everywhere. Miracles show the length that God goes through in his love for people, and Elijah is a type and helps us understand how Jesus is the Messiah. Kevin, anything else that you have to add?
Well, I appreciate this lesson, Jeff. I feel like I've learned a lot here just from the short time we've had this discussion. Some of that has been running through my mind here from what you said about our Elisha's message about God working and working his plan. Sometimes human nature, we want to know why things are happening, or why is this person in my life, or what should I be doing, or how is all this coming together? And we know God's in charge, but this account is a very good reminder. We have God working his plan where he's going to make sure that Elijah is fed in an unorthodox way by ravens. He's going to put someone in his life that is really a very sad character. She has a lot going on in her life, and she having Elijah in her life is certainly going to be a blessing because he's going to be able to raise her son. But we can see all this coming together from our reading because this is what God is commanding, and we get some insight because Elijah's telling us this is what the Lord has said. And so we can actually see God's plan coming together, and just a reminder to us in our lives that God is always working, and we want to know why things are happening around us. But I think the real thing to remember is that if we don't understand why, just know and have the faith that God is working and he's working his plan.
Those are great thoughts. Thanks for sharing that. So in our next lesson, we're going to see what happens when God says it's time to end the drought. And, just a clue, there's going to be a big contest. So thanks for being with us today in this online Bible study. We pray that God has blessed you through the study of his word. If you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, we'd encourage you to do that. If you have any questions about things that we're saying, if you have questions about our church, Our website is raleighchurchofchrist.org. We're on Facebook, Raleigh Church of Christ. Please don't hesitate to reach out if there's any way that we can serve you. Thanks for your attention today.